Hello, welcome to the May episode of Diary of a Philosopher, which is simply my rebrand for what I've been doing for some time now, which is just to do a monthly solo video giving a quick update on what I've been working on philosophically, what I've been doing in my public philosophy work, and then to answer 10 subscriber questions from my Substack. Really good questions this month. I think I've got some interesting thoughts to share on them in answering those questions, so stick around for that. Okay, I think the most significant event of recent times in my philosophical journey is that I had quite a powerful psychedelic experience which has impacted me quite deeply, and it's something that happened a little while back now, but I just wanted to really think about it before I started talking about it publicly. And then it's just recently, I suppose, that I've started talking about it publicly. I've talked about it a little bit on Joe Foley's channel, which went up this week. You can check out, went up last Sunday. Debated it a little bit with William Lane Craig at the Royal Institution in London a couple of weeks ago. That was an event with Joe Foley as well, and Jessica Fraser, who's a very good expert in Eastern religion. Craig and I had a little bit of a fiery debate, do we want to say, about the epistemic credentials of psychedelic experiences. Anyway, I'll save that treat for when it goes up. This will go up on my channel, maybe some others as well in the not too distant future, so subscribe. I also did, the week after that, a lecture at a sort of guest lecture at Liverpool University, which is my hometown, Liverpool, and coincidentally where I got my first permanent academic job. It was lovely to go back there. But I guess this was my philosophical reflections on this experience, and the million-dollar question: are these hallucinations? What should we think? Should we think these are hallucinations, or should we think they provide genuine insights into the ultimate nature of reality? You can guess my view on that. I'll give you a clue. William Lane Craig had the opposite view. Okay. Anyway, that lecture I'm also going to put up on my YouTube channel in the not too distant future. Another reason to subscribe. What else? Lots of things going on. I will update as time goes on. Turning to academic work, so I've finally submitted this bloody book, Heresy, which has been a hell of a lot of work, and it's so lovely to get back to academic work. And I'm doing actually a lot of collaborations, maybe using skills of other people that are skills I lack, expertise in physics or a little bit more mathematical ability. So I've been working with Kenny Boyce and Mark O'Brien on a paper on this issue of, can you explain cosmological fine-tuning in terms of a multiverse? You know, a standard setup is you either explain fine-tuning in terms of a multiverse or in terms of something goddish. I don't go for the very traditional idea of God, but I do believe in God in some sense. I don't think you can explain it in terms of a multiverse, so we're left with something goddish. God, we've got deep into the mathematics of probability in this paper, which is making my head hurt a little bit. We're going from one thing, going from, the public work of trying to struggle to make things accessible, and then getting to a very different challenge of getting deep into the mathematics of probability. I can need a bit of a lie down after this. But yeah, I really think we've got a really significant contribution to make to this decades-old debate and the literature on whether you can explain fine-tuning in terms of multiverse. And so yeah, I'm very excited to start submitting that to journals and start, once we've finished the paper, start trying to think on how to explicate it more to a more general audience. Although Kenny and I did go on Phil Halper's channel to debate it with two excellent theists on the other side, so you can You can check that out. But hopefully, it's a hard issue. It's a really challenging issue, and hopefully I can start to make it a bit more accessible once I get my bloody head around it. It's mind wrecking, that stuff. With Kelvin McQueen, I've returned to my work with him, exploring, rediscovering an interpretation of quantum mechanics by the physicist Ewan Squires from the 1990s that got kind of forgotten about, which is kind of it's a form of dualism combined with many worlds. Right? So there's many worlds about the physical world. So the physical world keeps branching into different versions of itself, but consciousness just goes down one of the branches, right? And that's where you get probability from. So Ewan Squires died a little bit before his time, and he was a physicist rather than a philosopher. So we're just trying to work out, get precise and rigorous about this view. And I actually, the more we've done that, I think it's a really interesting, attractive view in lots of ways. Not saying it's true, but it's definitely worth thinking about. With Ralph Weir, very good substance dualist, we've been writing an opinionated piece for an undergraduate textbook, actually, on metaphysics, and we're basically arguing that all forms of physicalism end up illusionists, end up in fact denying the reality of consciousness. That's where I've increasingly been thinking, and we're arguing for that. And so it should be a quite accessible paper because it's for an undergraduate textbook. Ralph's brilliant. Check out his public work. He was on Joe Schmidt's channel recently. He was talking a lot about my stuff, actually, and revelation, which is not revelation in the religious sense, which is kind of, I talked about this a little bit on Joe Foley's channel. We got really in depth. What I really liked about that interview is we got really in depth into the consciousness debate, and like my academic contribution to it, which is to do with this revelation thesis that we, to a significant extent, understand what consciousness is from the inside. And I think it's that really rules out physicalism once you accept that. So, and this is where, really where I differ from David Chalmers and, the way we critique physicalism. I mean, you might think at a deeper level we're sort of doing the same thing, but at least that's where I've focused the debate and argued the debate is focused on whether or not revelation is true. You accept it, physicalism is gone. You don't accept it, physicalism is fine. So, but that's where the debate should be. And I never talked about it publicly because I thought it's sort of too complicated, too subtle. And I thought, listening to Ralph on Joe Schmidt's channel, I was like, why am I not talking about this? Because I think it really makes the problems of physicalism much clearer, I think. Maybe rather than going with these kind of thought experiments of zombies and Mary and stuff. So, going to be talking a lot about revelation. And finally, doing a collaboration with Nino Kadic, great young up-and-coming panpsychist, working on monadic forms of panpsychism where there's no mental combination. And so my mind and your mind is identical with a single particle. Sounds a bit wacky. I think I'm not sold on it myself, but Nino's been doing really, really cool, interesting work defending this stuff. And then I remembered that years and years ago I did a plenary talk at the big annual consciousness conference they have in Tucson, and I just sort of laid out a version of this that I dreamt up on a drunken night out with Hedda Hasselmerk and Jonathan Simons, and they lost interest in it quickly, but I talked about it at this event anyway. And so I thought, talking to Nino, we'll collaborate a paper. He'll talk about his monadic views, and I'll sort of add something on that, on the version of monadic panpsychism I dreamt up. So it's not something I accept, but things are very uncertain. It's early days of consciousness and quantum mechanics, and it's good to explore lots of different possibilities if you do so in a clear, rigorous, scientifically informed, mathematically rigorous way. You know, don't get tied down with biases about, what's, culturally respectable. You just ask, there needs to be constraints, and the constraints are the empirical data where it's relevant, and where we're dealing with philosophical issues, conceptual rigor, where we're dealing with mathematical issues, mathematical rigor, and we're all good. So, some people think I have wacky views or I explore wacky views, but I would defend their credibility on those grounds. All right, that's that. I'm sure there's other things going on that I haven't mentioned, but that's my May update on my life. It might be interesting, thinking of it as a diary, to think, changing views on things. Maybe in 10 years' time, I'll look back and go, what was I thinking? Now I'm a physicalist illusionist. How did I believe all that wacky stuff? Anyway, right, let's get to these subscriber questions. Okay, all right. So what I do is I prioritize paid subscriber questions and say, if you're a paid subscriber, thank you so much for your support. Paid subscriber on Substack, I will definitely answer your questions. I think I've been not realizing which questions are subscriber questions, paid subscriber questions rather. I've just realized what icon indicates that, so I'm sorry if I've missed out some of my paid subscribers questions, and I did actually lose half a dozen paid subscribers in 1 week, and I wonder whether it's because that, I don't know. Anyway, apologies, but I've worked that out now, so moving forward I'm definitely going to answer paid subscriber questions. Okay, starting with one from Benjamin Andre. So I won't read out the whole thing, Benjamin, but basically, I believe in libertarian free will now. And in my Why book, I have a discussion of free will, a case of free will where someone's deciding whether to cheat on their partner. And they sort of, they really want to do this, but there's moral considerations about their marriage and so on, and then the free choice. Anyway, I just discussed that. But Benjamin asked an interesting question. He just says, well, what? Suppose someone has. So this is how Benjamin puts it. You could have three possibilities, three possible ways this scenario could go. There could be a completely overwhelming subjective reason, right? I really want to sleep with this person. A completely or an alternative scenario B, a completely overwhelming moral reason, like, no, this is wrong. I value my marriage. Is that a moral reason? Or, and when I say overwhelming, I think what Benjamin means is in terms of the person's psychology. What is just, they're just completely overwhelmed by that reason, the first reason, or the second reason, the subjective reason, as Benjamin puts it, or the objective reason, the moral reason. Or it could be they're equally compelling in the person's psychology, the moral consideration of their marriage and the subjective consideration, as Benjamin puts it, of their desire. And then Benjamin says, what is it then? Is it sort of something needs to be done, a coin toss or something? And he asks, are these equally free? Are these equally free choices? So where you've got one compelling reason, or where the reasons are sort of equally matched? Well, what I would respond is I would sort of have issues with the setup, really. Describing the first case as a subjective reason. And I think this comes into, I think, philosophers bundle together lots of different things under the term desire. So there are times, maybe there are times where you're just completely compelled by a desire. You just desire to sleep with someone, and you're just not even thinking, just completely pushed forward. But a lot of the time, you're not completely overwhelmed or compelled. You say, you know that you would really enjoy this. This will bring you great pleasure. And that is why you did it, because it will bring you great pleasure. And in that case, I want to say that this is an objective reason, right? The fact that something will bring you pleasure is an objective reason for action, right? The fact that something will give you pleasure is a reason to do it. Now, there's a moral question of, because I think other people's pleasure or pain also gives you reason for action, right? So if people are very selfish and immoral, it's because it's not. So I wouldn't say that they're acting from their subjective rather than objective reasons. I would say the selfish, immoral person is overvaluing one kind of objective reasons, namely the objective reasons that arise from their own pleasure, or from the fact that something will give them pleasure, rather than other people's pleasure, other people's pain, right? So what I'm saying, I guess this is bringing up my kind of moral objectivism. I think all these decisions are about objective reasons. We're weighing up objective reasons. We're making decisions on the basis of objective reasons. It's just that the immoral person overvalues the objective reasons that arise from their own pleasure, right? And as such, they're doing something irrational, right? If you've got a case where, something's going to bring you a bit of pleasure, but it's going to cause someone else a hell of a lot of pain, then you have two objective reasons. One objective reason is your own pleasure. The other objective reason comes from this person's pain, and the reason coming from the person's pain is massively overwhelming. So you're not doing, on balance, what you have reason to do. Okay? So really, I would set up this case where that it's all about objective reasons. So we've got, in the first scenario, the objective reason that's compelling the person is their own pleasure. In the second scenario, the objective reason is moral considerations about the well-being of their partner, or perhaps the value of their marriage. Is that moral? Is that selfish? Blah, blah. Bit of both, maybe. Okay, so that's the first point, and I think that's hopefully revealed. I mean, this is kind of connected to the stuff I argued on this channel with Alex O'Connor about, just hopefully helpful about how I think about agency, moral objectivity. But still, I think, even given that different way of setting things up, I think Benjamin has a good point. What about the third case so I wouldn't put it now as which is more compelling psychologically, but a case where the two reasons, your judgment is that the two reasons are perfectly equal, right? So let's think of the case. So it might be, one objective reason is, I really love this new person. It's going to bring me such joy. It's going to bring us both happiness. I think I want to be with this person. And the other is valuing your relationship with your current partner and your history and so on. And it could be a situation where those are perfectly balanced reasons. Okay? So then it's not a matter of immorality. I think immorality is where you mistakenly, you might not be making a mistake, or willfully overvalue reasons to do with your own pleasure. But this might be a case where two kinds of reasons are equally balanced. So then Benjamin asks an interesting question: Is this really free when you go one way or the other? And maybe in that case it just amounts to a coin toss or something, or a kind of random choice. It's like what's the name that I can't remember now, the fabled ass who's equally distant between two bales of hay. It's like, which I and then dies of hunger because can't decide which to go to for. So yeah, so I guess I'm inclined to think in those cases where things are perfectly balanced in terms of objective, rational considerations rather than psychological drives, I reject that whole Humean picture. Connect to the Alex O'Connor talk if you want more on that. But yeah, then it is kind of random, I think. Okay, interesting stuff. I can tell that in a bit of a roundabout way, but never mind. Hope the point was clear. Okay, second question. Tyler Perez. Again on free will, how do you imagine the causal chain between will, preference, choice? I'm curious to hear what you think it looks like in both directions, i.e. how does mental will effectuate macroscopic physical actions, and how does the physical world end up affecting will and preference? I think, Tyler, I would reject the sort of dichotomy you're setting up between the mental and the physical. I mean, as a panpsychist, I think there is just consciousness, but there is just the physical world as well. The physical world is all that exists, but it's made up of consciousness. That's the panpsychist position. But in my why book, I defend a form of panagentialism, thinking not only consciousness, but a basic kind of agency go all the way down. So at the fundamental level, we've got particles or fields basically just pursuing their conscious yearnings, which I think is a rational thing to do. That is one rational thing to do. If you feel like doing something, you have a reason to do it. And then the thought is that's why the inanimate world is so predictable, because it's just these simple conscious entities just pursuing their acting in a sense freely, but pursuing their yearnings because they don't have the capacity for rational deliberation. But then when we get to human beings, we still have those reasons to, if you feel like doing something, do it. But we also have rational deliberation, and we are aware of more sophisticated value considerations. Value considerations arising from other people's pain, from things of great value like knowledge or creativity, or long-term well-being, and they might balance out reasons arising from I feel like doing this. So again, I think it's like the whole package. So I think that I have a very holistic, unified picture of agency where everything from moral choices to immoral choices to movements of particles is all the same kind of thing in a broader sense of rationality, pursuing reasons, very crude reasons, more sophisticated reasons, overvaluing certain reasons rather than balancing out and seeing what overall you have reason to do. But still, it's all sort of the same kind of thing. All right, Daniel, what does strong emergent panpsychism do for us that a strong emergent physicalism couldn't do? Do you think Galen Strawson's anti-strong emergence objections to type B physicalism cut against emergent panpsychism? Good question. You might want to check out Alex O'Connor recently interviewed Galen Strawson, who was my PhD supervisor, who's a panpsychist. He was like the only panpsychist around when I wanted to do a PhD. And he was brilliant. I mean, it's just, I didn't have another choice, but he was a good choice. But we have different, we have basically the same view, but we get there in different ways. He has this intuition that you can't get consciousness from non-consciousness, so consciousness must be down there all along. That's not my motivation. My motivation, I don't necessarily buy that intuition. And this came up in the discussion with Joe Foley. You know, I think there could be weird properties at the base of reality that aren't consciousness properties, but somehow are suited to produce consciousness. We call this proto-consciousness. But my reason for rejecting that is more, simplicity based. Why would you believe in a completely unknown, mysterious kind of property when you have no theoretical motivation for doing so? But I hope what came out with my talk with Joe Foley as well, I might write something on a Substack on this, is like, what I'm most confident about is the falsity of physicalism. That's where I think like I'm really really confident. And then there are many different alternatives to physicalism, and I'm kind of open to all of them. And I choose panpsychism because I just think it's the most simple, elegant, unified. But other possibilities may be true as well, and especially the pan-proto-psychist view. I'm very much open to that. That is, a real live possibility for me. So, okay, but then if we're going for strong emergence, right? So then Daniel's question, sorry, digress a little bit from Daniel's question there. Okay, if we've got these, if we're allowing for strong emergentist panpsychism, where you've got you don't have a reductionist story, you have a kind of layered view of reality with new forms of unity, new forms of consciousness emerging. Well, what's the advantage of being a panpsychist? Why not just be a strong emergentist physicalist, right? Where you've got new things arising at higher levels of complexity, one of them being consciousness, right? So, the postulation of conscious particles starts to look redundant, right? Because you've got new things popping up anyway at higher levels. Why not just have non-conscious particles and have consciousness popping up at a higher level? Well, basically, because that's not physicalism, right? Physicalism, I think, by definition, is a reductionist picture. What we're now talking about is David Chalmers' property dualism, right? That's David Chalmers' view, that there's special psychophysical laws, and so at high levels of complexity, in certain conditions, consciousness pops out, right? So we've just got physical stuff at the bottom. Consciousness is this radical new thing, so that's why it's dualism. It's like a radical, fundamental thing that pops up at higher levels. Tim O'Connor, as well, is a sort of emergentist dualist who we first interviewed on mine and Keith's Mind Chat channel years and years ago. Anyway, so it's just not physicalism anymore. Okay, but and why go for strong emergentist panpsychism over strong emergentist dualism? Look, I'm open to both. So this comes back to what I just said. So it wasn't really a digression, in a sense. Just the panpsychist view is simpler, right? The dualist believes in two kinds of properties. Why believe in two kinds of properties when you can just believe in one? So it's like essentially the same view, except for the panpsychist, there is only one kind of property. Whereas for the dualist, there are two kinds of properties. So look, it could be true. Dualism could be true, but I think I'm just doing what you do in science and philosophy. You try and go for this. You give most credence, attach the highest probability to the view that is the most simple and elegant and unified, which is panpsychism. So I think, panpsychism, is my view, is the simplest alternative to physicalism, and physicalism is definitely false. As soon as you accept that we know what consciousness is from the inside, I've got a bit of nuance on how I define that. Check out my chat with Joe Foley. But as soon as you accept that, physicalism is gone. Okay. Next question comes from There Exists an X. Love the name. So There Exists an X. You're not a paid subscriber, but a paid subscriber commented on your question, which means I read out your question. Oh yeah, so thanks Tyler Perez and Daniel. Thank you for your support. It is true that I can't be doing. I'm incredibly busy and got young kids. I can't be doing this without, for example, this money's paying someone using someone. That was a bit of an exploitative way of phrasing it, and the person is going to hear that when they're editing the video. Paying someone to edit the videos. I just absolutely do not have time to do myself, so I would just stop doing this. So I'm very grateful. Thank you. So the question is, I wonder, what is the Goffian opinion on abortion? Change of subject now. Big moral issues. I haven't stuck to 20 minutes, have I? As always with me, as often is the case, I see something on both sides of the debate. Look, I think every abortion is a tragedy. It's a loss of a human life. I would want to emphasize that. And, often, most people do on both sides of this debate. Sometimes pro-choice people sort of trivialize the loss of life that takes place in abortion. So I do think an abortion is a tragedy. However, I do not think a woman is morally obliged to have her body used for the 9 months required to continue that life. Okay? And if that sounds a bit weird, you think, well, if it's, if the fetus has a right to life, you can't, you've got to keep that going. Do check out Judith Jarvis Thompson's argument from the violinist analogy, her violinist analogy thought experiment. So the basic idea is, we imagine, you wake up and you've been kidnapped and you're tied up in a hospital bed and you've been attached to the most famous violinist in the world. And what's happened is the Society of Music Lovers have kidnapped you because you're the only donor who can keep the violinist alive. The violinist has some rare condition that's going to kill them, and only you can save their life. And but you've got to stay in this hospital bed, tied up in some discomfort for 9 months to keep them alive. And the thought is, obviously, the violinist has a right to life, but you're not obliged to stay there for 9 months against your choice. So the analogy, I hope you guessing, is with pregnancy, that yes, the fetus has a right to life, but the woman is not obliged to have her body used. I mean, the most direct case the most direct comparison to fit the analogy is the case of rape, right? Which corresponds to being kidnapped in the thought experiment. But Judith Jarvis Thompson, expands on the analogy to try and make sense of cases other than the rape case. And so basically, I do think a woman has a right to an abortion. Check out her paper. Well, Daniel adds loads of good stuff for a panpsychist to cover with respect to sentientism here, if he goes that way, if Philip goes that way, me being Philip. Lots of written on narrow sentientism, philosophical Vulcans, etc. I recommend Luke Roloff's work on motivational sentientism if the intersection of panpsychism and abortion ethics interest you. Thanks, Daniel. Worthwhile adding people who want to check out. Maybe there's a PhD in that, the connection between panpsychism and abortion ethics, something I haven't thought about. I've really failed to keep this video to 20 minutes, haven't I? Okay. Philocosmia, cool name. What makes you wholly you? Written with a 4-month-old attached to me in a carrier. Ah, I love that. I sometimes get emails from people saying, "Oh, I'm listening to your audiobooks while I'm up all night trying to get my newborn baby to sleep and stuff," and really lovely. It's make me cry a bit. I cry all the time, I went to see The Magic Faraway Tree. Oh my God. My parents read this to me when I was little, and so I took my kids. I literally cried from start to finish. My elder child, my 9-year-old, was embarrassed at me, but it's really lovely. It's about, it's framed as getting kids away from screens, and I'm starting to cry. Getting out into the magic of the forest, and it's embarrassing, isn't it? Sorry. Get a grip on yourself, Goff. Okay, anyway. What makes you wholly you? Okay, I mean, I'm increasingly attracted to a sort of strong emergentist form of panpsychism, where the subjective experience is a new fundamental entity, or at least a new fundamental unity. So not some radically new thing that's added, like a soul, something that's composed of more fundamental physical things, particles, fields, cells, atoms, molecules, but which has a radical unity of its own at a time and across time. So then what makes me me is a primitive fact that I am this primitive kind of unity. I mean, here's a question. Is the unity, am I my brain, or am I the whole organism? I mean, I would say I am the thing that has conscious experience. The thing I pick out when I use the Cartesian I think, therefore I am. The thing that directly and immediately has conscious experience. That's me. Is that the brain, part of the brain, or is that the whole organism? I'm a little bit agnostic about that, to be honest. I've always thought the brain, but I don't know. All these questions are very difficult. But anyway, whatever it is that has my consciousness, I think is a fundamental unity across time. You know, some panpsychists get a bit annoyed at me that I'm not more deflationary about the self. I tend to find most panpsychists are a bit more deflationary about the self. But anyway, that's where I am at the moment. Not my most firm opinion. So it's a sort of primitive unity. I'm open to the possibility, though, that primitive unity ceases to exist in dreamless sleep every night. So we die every day. I'm persuaded by Barry Dainton. Barry Dainton has, my former colleague at Liverpool, has very interesting stuff about reflecting on our conscious experience over time. And that's persuaded me, actually, that Buddhists are wrong, that there is sort of continuity of identity. And Galen Strawson's wrong, by the way, my former supervisor. He thinks selves exist, but they last about 3 seconds. And but I'm inclined to think there is continuity, at least through the working day. The waking day. I think that reveals, in a Freudian way, something about me that I said working day instead of waking day. I'm not going to get onto my emails today, am I? It's too much fun, this. I think this is one of my favourite parts of the month, doing these little videos. Crying over the magic faraway tree. Okay, Clashman. Oh, this is a good question. Do you think... I'm just halfway through the bloody questions. Right, I've got to speed up, man. I've got to speed up. Do you think the disagreement between Type B physicalism and illusionism becomes a merely terminological dispute once revelation is denied? It seems like I'm equally in the dark about my own experience on both views, and I don't see what extra upside the Type B physicalist gets compared to the illusionist, besides keeping around terms like phenomenal consciousness and qualia. Yeah, this is a very cool question, and maybe connects to this paper me and Ralph Weir are working on, arguing basically all physicalists are illusionists. I mean, yeah, once you deny revelation, I think you can be a physicalist, right? You know, once you know, we don't know what the hell consciousness is. So, like, I think the mainstream physicalist position, like had by someone like David Papineau, is basically, and sometimes this is explicitly said, sometimes it's just implicit in the setup of the theory. Basically, their view is, we don't know what the hell consciousness is. When you think about your pain and introspect, you think about your pain in terms of how it feels. You're just sort of pointing at something inside yourself. Turns out it's a brain state, right? Then physicalism makes perfect sense. It's just like other scientific identities, right? You see lightning in the sky. What is that in the sky? Is it the anger of the gods? We don't know what the hell it is until we do the science, find out it's electric discharge. What is this water stuff? Is it a fundamental element? You do the science, you find out it's H2O. So if we've just got no idea what consciousness is introspectively, from the inside, as it were, yeah, it could turn out to be patterns of neural firings, right? So you might as well be a physicalist. And then you might think, well, why be an illusionist? But I suppose we've still got the question, why is physicalism so hard to accept? Why is it intuitively false? That's something David Papineau takes very seriously, that there is this strong intuition that it can't be true, that my feelings aren't patterns of neural firings. And perhaps the best explanation of that is the intuition of revelation, right? So even if revelation is false, that we know what consciousness is from the inside, maybe we still have the strong intuition of it. And that's why we find physicalism difficult to accept, because we think, I know what consciousness is. And so I know it's not neural firings, right? A couple of steps there in that argument. So yeah, so maybe you're right, Clashman. Thanks for that thought. So yeah, I think this connects to what me and Ralph say in his paper. Maybe we should give you a footnote credit. And we were sort of already thinking what I've just said, but yeah, I think it's a really astute point to make. Richard Dorset, is water to H2O the same as green to a certain light frequency? It's a good question. I remember getting taught like Kripke as an undergraduate, water, H2O, and lightning, electric discharge. Yeah, colour does seem different, doesn't it? It seems more intuitively connected to like how the experience, how colour looks. Maybe that's because I think in the case of colour, we're more inclined to the view David Chalmers calls Edenic colour. We're more inclined to think the redness of our experience, the red quality is really out there on the surface, which connects to, you know, how Galileo set up science, basically set up physical science by saying, no, the qualities aren't really out there in the world. Strip them out so then we can capture everything mathematically. But there is a temptation, isn't there, to think the quality is, and some philosophers defend that this is true actually, that the quality is really out there on the surface. So that's the sense in which I think we have to be a bit revisionary from that pre-theoretical assumption about colour. Maybe we just say, no, the reddish experience, that quality is just what connects us to it. It's not, you know, the colour itself is just light reflectance properties, wavelength reflectance. Or maybe you could say, well, no, its colour is a disposition to cause that kind of experience with that quality. So then you've got more of a connection, like John Locke thought, sort of following Galileo and Descartes, you know, trying to bring a bit more philosophical rigor to the view and saying, well, maybe it's a disposition to cause the colour experience. Okay, interesting thing to throw in here. What about heat? I think we tend to think of heat. We definitely want to identify heat with the sort of physical properties of molecular motion, or I don't think that quite generalizes, does it? But however we understand heat in physics, but heat seems very intuitively connected to feeling hot, doesn't it? Anyway, I think these are interesting questions, but I do think they're not sort of metaphysical questions. They're just to do with our concepts. I guess some philosophers think all philosophy is to do with our concepts, but I don't think so. Okay. Oh, Jesus. I'm not going to get my emails done. Pelorus asks, I was interested by you situating your view in continuity with Russell and Eddington. How does your view differ, if at all, from their neutral monism? I mean, I could say Eddington seems more of a panpsychist, to be honest. Russell, it's controversial what his view is in the analysis of matter. I mean, it sort of gets close to panpsychism, but he seems to have this view that kind of perceptions are not mental perceptions, like by which he means our sort of perceptual state is not essentially conscious. It's consciousness in more a relational sense. What else since I've read this? I mean, there's one of the volumes that kickstarted the renaissance of panpsychism, the new wave, was Consciousness in the Physical World by Alter and Nagasawa, and there are 2 scholarly articles in there on, what was Russell's view, and they disagree. One of them says he basically has Sam Coleman's view. Recent interview on this channel with Sam Coleman, Panqualityism. I can't remember what the other interpretation was, but look, basically, I like the crucial insight of Russell. Physics sort of doesn't tell us what matter is, so we need a place for the mental, stick it in there. I don't feel tied to his specific view. It's more the kind of insight. Snake detection theory. Okay, we got a physicalist here now. Thank you. Need a bit of physicalism in the mix. I didn't say about things coming up on the channel. I'm having discussion with Liz Jackson about can atheists go to church? Can you be religious if you don't believe? Tyler McNabb, do Buddhists believe in God? He's inclined to think many different religions basically are classical theists, including certain forms of Buddhism. Should be a cool discussion. I was going to do it in person while he's in the UK, but I think I've just got too much going on. So I might do it remotely. Anyway, subscribe. I should do some consciousness ones as well, shouldn't I? Okay, snake detection theory. If there were a lie detector in this world, it would indicate true when I say I have phenomenal consciousness. I would do the same in a zombie world. So zombies are telling the truth when they say I have consciousness. So are you an illusionist about zombie consciousness? Cool question, snake detection theory, and cool name. I mean, look, there's one question is, do zombies have thoughts, beliefs? I think you have to have some kind of mental states to lie. You have to have beliefs, and that's controversial, and I don't think they do. I think mental states, beliefs and judgments and thoughts are grounded in consciousness. So I don't think mere mechanisms have any kind of thought, so they can't lie. But suppose you do think that, then so suppose you just have a sort of information processing idea of thought. I'm oversimplifying. If you're a philosopher, I'm oversimplifying when I say that, but then I would say actually what they're referring to is not consciousness, but is whatever in them plays the role of consciousness. So actually what they call consciousness is not consciousness, is some physical state. And they have that. so they just mean something different by consciousness. Very interesting paper by classic paper by Coty Balog. Sorry, Coty, blanking on your name there. From back in the day, from the 90s, arguing about this. Can't remember what it's called now, but defending physicalism against the classic arguments on thinking about what thoughts. Thinking about a zombie running the conceivability argument. And saying that the zombie David Chalmers or the zombie Philip Goff could, run these anti-physicalist arguments and get the same conclusion. And think, oh my God, my world is non-physical, even though actually they're zombies. Interesting arguments. And my PhD student Duncan Lee, who recently graduated, very good PhD, discussing all these and arguing against conceivability arguments, partly on this basis. Anyway, all right, final question by Thomas Zimmerman asks, give a 30-second elevator pitch for Christianity's posterior being more plausible than not, no biggie. Is it just evidence in the likelihood of gospel resurrection accounts interpreted as visions or unknown energy? Done your homework, thank you. Know my view. Times multiplied by the prior of Christianity, again with that visionary or immaterial resurrection bent, plus the limited God. It's not immaterial resurrection, although it is visionary experiences. I identify the resurrection and the ascension. Anyway, is it that simple? Thanks. Of course, that evidence in the likelihood times the prior both weighed against no Christianity. Thanks again. Okay, well, maybe I'll say something in a way that makes sense to people who are not as familiar with Bayesian probabilistic reasoning, if that's okay, Thomas. Yeah, what I want to emphasize is the case for Christianity for me is very holistic. It's a package of lots of different things, and it's only the whole package that makes the case. So each individual thing wouldn't do anything, but for me it's the whole package. So I mean, I'll be talking about some things in my Liverpool lecture I'll put up soon about the theology, the philosophy of Eastern Orthodox Christianity makes a lot of sense to me, both of psychedelic experiences that I take very seriously, and provides explanations of why the universe exists, why it's fine-tuned for life. I tend to think those things are missing from Buddhism or Advaita Vedanta. So that's one part of it. I do think the historical origins of Christianity are a little bit tricky to explain. Why did this messianic sect carry on when the Messiah was executed, which is sort of goes against all messianic expectations? It's a little bit tricky to explain. I think any of the naturalistic explanations are not sort of incredibly satisfying. And I just want to emphasize, look, I mean, that in itself doesn't do anything, right? I'm not thinking it's the package. I'm not thinking like an atheist's going to, it's hard to explain the origins of Christianity. It must be true. No. And this is why I reject, these Christian apologists who think, we can prove the resurrection happened. I mean, I don't think of it like that's some proof from this one bit of evidence. At the same time, there is something to this. There is something hard to explain about the origins of Christianity. So, like, you get these debates, between, I don't know, Mike Licona and Bartham, and, like, you can prove the resurrection, or, no, don't be ridiculous, you can't prove a miracle. I kind of agree with both of them. And, you can put this in Bayesian terms, in terms of priors and stuff. But, yeah, in the mix, that's a factor. But also, here's another important factor. How fucking cool Jesus was. I mean, I'm serious. I just read the Gospels bit every night, and just this incredible character, what he taught, what he did, what he said. I mean, everyone thinks Jesus is cool, don't they? Find US evangelicals. I wanted to say to William Lane Craig and such, actually, why don't you talk more? Why don't you ever talk about the moral concerns of Christ, the poor, the weak, the disenfranchised, I know, you say he's okay, he's a philosopher, he's that's, but he just talk about abortion, he just talk about gay marriage, he just talk on his podcast about violence in movies. It's too much fun, okay, but if you're going to talk about ethics, why not talk about the moral concerns of Christ? So anyway, it's just this incredible moral thought, light years over its time. Now, again, I'm not doing a C.S. Lewis saying, so it proves Christianity. It's totally fine for an atheist to say, yeah, Jesus is cool, but he wasn't God. Fine. Joe Levine said that to me. And I'm not saying, I'm also not saying he was the most uniquely amazing person in history, Fine, the Buddha's amazing, lots of amazing people. Muhammad was amazing. Right, I'm just saying it's the mix. For me, it's the whole thing. How Eastern Orthodox Christianity can make sense of those experiences that I take very seriously, those philosophical arguments I take very seriously, how cool Jesus was, how weird the origins of Christianity were. It's the whole package. And finally, though, it's still very uncertain. I think I'm at the stage of thinking, it's more likely true than false. But I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't true. I think faith is about getting to the point where it's credible enough that you think, I'm going to trust, I'm going to hope, I'm going to live this out. And I say, 30% could be enough. So I feel quite lucky, actually, that I actually think it's more likely true than false. That this like amazing mystical story of the world. Mystical because I interpret in the Eastern Orthodox way, which is very mystical. Got my new habit of engaging street preachers, and I'll save that for another time. I've talked too long. I love these, Anyway, thanks for your questions and your support. Oh, it's nearly a bloody hour. I was going 20 minutes. Anyway, really fun. Thank you for everything that's been going on. I haven't been as attentive to the comments on my Substack. I don't look at I need to look at the comments on the YouTube, don't I? Let me try and do that. So busy. Please forgive me. I'm trying. Everyone's telling me to set up an Instagram. My publishers tell me I need to set up an Instagram. I don't want another social media platform. I don't want to do more social. Oh, please don't make me do it. Please don't make me do it. All right. Thanks for listening. That's my Diary of a Philosopher for May. It's cool, cringy, new branding. Speak again in June. Subscribe, support me financially if you're able. I don't take any of the money for myself. I'm rambling. Speak in June. Take care. Be kind to each other. Why can't I stop?